Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the May 26th, 2022 Curriculum Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township. Could we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't need a roll call for a committee meeting, is that correct?
No, that's correct.
So I can just hand this meeting over to Jen? Jen, it's all yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Feinberg. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for this opportunity to share an overview of our comprehensive plan, as well as information about our special education plan. I'm going to start this evening with the first overview I discussed, and then I will welcome my colleague, Nicole Battistelli, and potentially Mrs. Adalizzi, to share some information about the special education plan as well. So thank you. Clicking to the next slide would be great. Thank you. First, I wanted to go ahead and define what is a comprehensive plan. Can we go back one? It's a fast clicker. There we go. Okay, great. Thank you. You've heard us talk a lot about strategic plans over the last couple of years, and a comprehensive plan is a little bit different, but they are related. So we'll talk about that throughout the presentation this evening. This plan, the comprehensive plan, is required by the Pennsylvania Department of Education, and it's got to be completed every 3 years. And it always includes the elements that you see listed here. So essentially, you have to have an overview of the school district, sort of, like how big are we, what's our population, et cetera. You have to have a development of mission and goals. We conduct needs assessments, which includes looking at a lot of data and completing some surveys and having some conversations with folks about root causes for what we see in our data. We, of course, have goal setting, and then the goals come with action plans, and those often involve both professional development as well as communication plans. And then the final step of the comprehensive plan is that they do require you monitor it. And then in 3 years, you create another comprehensive plan, hopefully because you've already accomplished the goals from the prior plan, or you may continue with those goals if there's now more work to be done on them. So when we're looking at the comprehensive and the strategic plans, I just wanted to talk about how they're related. So they're both based on the strategic planning input from the stakeholders. We very purposefully did the strategic planning ahead of the comprehensive planning because we wanted to have already established with the input from the community what our major umbrellas and our focus areas would be. And so that was intentional, knowing that the comprehensive plan was going to come up and we would need to have had a revised mission, a revised set of pillars, and know our areas for improvement. Both a comprehensive and a strategic plan address academics, social emotional wellness, and diversity and inclusion. For us, that's for both of our sets of plans, we will see those things. Both have measurable goals, both have action plans, and they all have related professional development. The comprehensive plan essentially supports the strategic plan and is a little bit more specific in addressing specific needs that are seen in the data for academic performance and growth. So just in addition to doing all of those steps, part of the comprehensive planning process also includes completing all of these additional state required reports. So there's an academic standards report where you really make sure that you're covering all the standards in each subject and each grade. We do have to just revise and submit an induction plan, making sure we meet certain criteria. Same goes for professional development. Student services assurances, our pupil services department takes care of, as well as the gifted plan assurances. So those are just sort of checklists where you make sure that our programs are meeting the requirements that are set forth by the state. Of course, there is a steering committee. Our steering committee includes all of our administrators, several of our educators, and because we have our mission and our pillars as developed by our strategic plan folks, all of those people are also considered part of the steering committee for the comprehensive plan. It always takes a village, right? It's never something that one person could sit in a room and do themselves. Just as a reminder, The mission and pillars, we can go to thank you, the next one. The mission and pillars from our strategic plan, you hear them at every board meeting. Those are the ones that we included in the comprehensive plan. So, the mission to educate and inspire a community of lifelong learners who become well-rounded global citizens. Okay, so getting into the actual, I think it's one back. Thank you. The actual, the comprehensive plan, the student performance data that we are required to take a look at includes the state assessment data, looking both at achievement as well as growth, as is reported by the system called PVAS, the Pennsylvania Value Added Assessment System, which really measures growth from year to year for groups of students. We also use our own screeners that we use here that are national screeners, like the Ames Web, MAP Growth, those benchmarks that you hear us talking about all the time. We take a look at our district assessments. So how did kids do on unit tests? How do they do on the things we created? We also look at overall grades, specifically at the secondary level. We like to see who's getting what kinds of grades, how does that compare to prior years, because the grades are based on both performance as well as work habits. And we know that work habits have a lot to do with success in college and out of school as well. So it's not just how do you do on a test, it's are you able to do all of the things that are required to get a good grade in a course. We also look at enrollment, so who's taking which courses and who is not taking which courses. Attendance, there is a requirement to look at that. We always do well there. Graduation rates, as well as college and career readiness indicators. So those are the data points that we look at. In addition to that, our leadership team is required to complete a needs assessment on the item you see here, conditions for leadership, teaching, and learning. And that can help us point in the direction if there's something that's needed as a system for our leadership team. And then finally, as you know, we use lots of surveys and data to develop that strategic mission, goals, and pillars. So from all of that, there's one before this. Yes, the strengths. From all of that, we have many, many, many strengths. And this is just some of the strengths. This is a list of just some of the strengths here. I don't expect you to be able to read all of that, on the screen right now, but it is there for your reference. I will highlight the bold items. The bold items are those that we were asked to sort of select the things that we would like to build on or emulate or somehow use as part of our thinking for creating the comprehensive plan. So I will mention that the first bolded item there says most grades and subjects show growth in the lowest scoring quintiles. So the state, when they give us our data back, whenever they do give us aggregate data, they will divide the scores into 5 sections. So the top 20% scoring, the next 20%, et cetera. And our lowest scoring percentiles, so the lowest quintiles, are showing growth. And that is exactly the group that you really need to show the growth because they're not yet hitting achievement. So you need to make sure that they are meeting the growth expectation or even exceeding it if you ever hope for them to close that gap. And we are seeing that to be the case. Anyone who's ever looked at the Future Ready Index knows that our keystone achievement and growth are exemplary. We are dark blue, which is the best color you could be, and we are often the top in the state for both growth and achievement, not the absolute top, but in the top scoring of the state for those areas. We also found a strength of ours is that we ensure effective standards-aligned curriculum and assessment because we have a curriculum review cycle that really forces us to take a look systematically at each subject area and make sure we're maintaining alignment with standards. And then also another thing, which was a really nice thing to see when we look at how do kids do who are in high-level courses. Are they doing well? Are they not doing well? We notice that no matter what subgroup a student is in, so low socioeconomic status, EL students, students with IEPs, those students who are in the high-level courses do well. They are proficient or higher, they're getting Bs, they're getting As. And so whatever's happening in those high-level courses is working for all kinds of people who come from all kinds of socioeconomic, et cetera, backgrounds. You'll hear me use the word subgroups a lot. We don't determine what the subgroups are. The state tells us who the subgroups are. And they include subgroups by race, by gender, by ethnicity. socioeconomic status, EL, students with English learner needs, students with IEPs, students with gifted IEPs, historically underperforming students. There are a lot of different groups that we look at to determine how are they doing and how are they doing relative to others. So I just wanted to define that for us. So again, lots of strengths here, lots of good things we could go on and on about, but we also need to focus on the challenges as well. So here we have the same application. We have a bunch of the challenges that we did determine, and then the bold ones are the ones we want to incorporate into the plan in some way. So again, I was talking about subgroups. Our subgroup achievement, so that's, were they proficient or advanced, right? Do they score high? It's about the score. There's a disparity in the performance between students with IEPs, students with low socioeconomic status, as defined by qualifying for free or reduced lunch, and students in certain race ethnicity groups versus the total population. So we have what people may call an achievement gap between those subgroups and the total population. And then we also have some subgroup growth disparity. So not only about achieving, but are they growing at the same rate between, not in all grades, but in some grades, particularly for the students with gifted IEPs, as well as our lowest scoring 33% and our IEP subgroups. So we really want to pay attention to how do we help those groups grow? Because if we pay attention to the growth, we're going to get to achievement. We're more concerned really with how do we get everybody growing, because we have lots and lots and lots of high achievement in this district. We also wanted to make sure that we were providing enough focus and support to schools on instructional strategies, evidence-based instructional strategies that are not only about teaching and learning, but teaching and learning in a belonging-based, in a culturally proficient way, in a way that has a climate where all students can learn. And we are using strategies that help dependent learners become independent learners. So we really want to focus our own learning on that kind of instructional strategy. You know already, because our strategic planning group came up with this, we also wanted to focus on recruitment, hiring, and retention of teachers of color, all kinds of educators, I should say, of color. That benefits all students, as we know, and has been reported here before. Somewhat related, we want to take a look really closely at, there's underrepresentation for several subgroups in high-level courses and in gifted programming. And in particular, it seems we have a lot of the non-white students and the lower socioeconomic students where we are not representing them proportionally. So for example, let's pretend we have 8% of our students in a particular school are Asian. Then 8% of the gifted population, or somewhere around there, you would expect would be Asian because it's proportional. In some cases, we have a great disparity between those two things. So we want to take a look at that and figure out what is that and what can we do about it. We are always, and Nicole and Natalia will talk about, always looking at how do we close that achievement gap for students with IEPs. And then it's so interesting. We have a really good, solid program for career and college readiness. We somehow, our systems are not working with the Pennsylvania Department of Education systems, and they don't seem to be registering what we send them about, yeah, we've got 98% of the kids qualifying, but it doesn't show up in their systems. So we just need, that's an easy one. We just need to figure that out and make that happen. It's a technical thing, but it's a part of the plan and we need to make sure it happens. So, sort of in summary, Haverford School District is high achieving and displays many strengths. We strive for continuous improvement, and this process of comprehensive planning has reinforced that Haverford really is a great place for the vast majority of our students. Our plan will center on strengthening the overall programming for all students, as well as targeting achievement and growth supports for specific groups, such as our high achieving students and our subgroups, including SES and non-white subgroups. We will also aim to standardize and improve the completion and reporting of that college and career readiness indicator. So there are a couple steps that have to be undertaken once you look at all this data, right? We analyze the data, we establish 4 priority statements. I'm going to go over those. From those priority statements, we got 5 measurable goals. Each of those goals has an action plan, and then we have professional development or communication plans that go with that. So I'm going to just take a deep breath because I'm about to go through all of that with you. Okay. I have numbered this. Number 1, there is no, it's not number of importance. It's just for easier reference that we can talk about number 1 or the green one. But we're going to talk about the priority statement, which we're labeling MTSS. MTSS stands for a multi-tiered system of support. And essentially the challenge we're trying to address here is that subgroup growth shows that disparity, right? So why are some subgroups performing better than other subgroups on the growth measure? And what we had considered, it's actually been a conversation that's happened over several years, is that we just weren't providing enough systematized, targeted instruction for all students, as well as not enough support for the regularization or the normalization of implementing differentiated instruction. So what we wanted to do was find some sort of systematic intervention that we could say is happening every day. And it's happening in this way that all students are getting some kind of direct targeted instruction. And so that is what we are calling MTSS. And that was our plan, is to start using MTSS, which you may know we have begun this year. If you go to the next one, we had to, just a quick aside about MTSS, just so folks know what I'm talking about here. Essentially, we're providing consistent intervention times. It's 45 minutes a day. It's grades 1 through 5, and it covers both math and English language arts. They alternate. Sometimes they do 2 days a week of one or 3 days a week of the other. Sometimes they do 2 weeks of one and then 2 weeks of the other. It depends on the grade or the school. It's a time that's set aside where all students sort of get up and go somewhere based on their performance, and they get instruction or practice or enrichment based on where they are. Our goal was to provide educators not only with the time to actually do this work, but also intervention tools that they could use. So we did add on lots of different interventions this year that people can use during that time period. And the idea was to not only provide this targeted support for all students to grow, but it would help us when we identify students, when we're in the process and trying to consider whether students need to be identified for an IEP. It's a sort of a second step in between, my students aren't doing well in my class, let's test for an IEP. It's my students aren't doing well in their core instruction, let's see if they can do better with an intervention. Let's see if they can do better with a different intervention. Okay, maybe now we need to test. That's the idea behind MTSS. Just so you know, the green, yellow, red graphic you see there, tier 1 is green here, and that's usually about 85%. The goal is to get about 85% of your students who really are proficient just with the core curriculum. And then you may have around 10% who need an additional intervention in order to be proficient. And then you typically have somewhere around 5% who really need more intense besides that other intervention, and you may want to be considering for special education. So that's sort of our goal for that. Okay, so back to the measurable goal. Our measurable goal, based on the need of getting those subgroups to grow, is that we'll increase the percentage of students demonstrating growth in both math and ELA as measured by district and state assessments, and using the full implementation of an elementary MTSS model. So there are sort of target goals along the way. That's supposed to be at the end of 3 years, you'll see that, and then they ask you to develop what's the year 1 goal, what's the year 2 goal. The action plan involves researching, developing, implementing, and then really refining MTSS, right? And then we also are going to be layering on a couple of more components. This year we looked at tier 1 and tier 2. Next year we're going to be examining what can that tier 3 look like, when can it occur, what materials would be used, who gets to do that, how do they qualify, as well as, and here's the multiple part of MTSS, looking at a social and behavioral component for this time period. It's not just about academics. You should have a tier 1, a tier 2, and a tier 3 for social, emotional, and behavior as well. So we're excited about that work that's going to be happening over the summer and over next year. All right, we're already to number 2. Wasn't that fast? So number 2 of 4 is the one I talked about the underrepresentation of specific groups, including non-white students, in gifted and enrichment level classes. So this is information each year our administrative team looks at enrollment data, and we have noticed a pattern over the years, over the last several years, that we just do not have students accurately represent, I shouldn't say accurately, proportionally represented in those high level and gifted classes. And quite frankly, we need to really study it. We don't know why. We've been looking at it. We've been trying, small things, identifying kids, talking kids into taking higher level classes, reaching out to folks, all kinds of things. But we would like to really spend some energy finding out what are the confounding factors, what are the barriers, and then really coming up with a plan, a set of action steps where we might be able to remove some of those barriers or approach this differently. And it may even become, we were talking about with the strategic plan, what's going to be the focus of our equity audit? And now we are having a conversation, could this be a focus of the equity audit? Is this where we pull in an outside source to start taking a look at our program and doing that review and helping us understand how this has been improved in other places? So that's a question we're asking ourselves. So the action plan, the goal itself is that the percentage of non-white students, as well as other subgroups in gifted programming and higher level courses, wherever those exist, will be representative of their percentage of the overall population. So that's our goal, is to get to a more proportional representation. And so we're going to research and develop a way to do a program review. We're going to do a program review, and then we're going to come up with action steps and then implement those action steps. Of course, there'll be lots of communication that goes on with that. We will bring that back to this group and, present at board meetings, making sure the board and the public continue to be informed about that work. Okay. Nice try, Nicole, it's only 3. Okay, all right, number 3. The next one is career readiness. I sort of described this one already. So we just need to get our systems talking. We need to be recording and reporting the right way so that we have those indicators correctly logged in PIMS for PDE. And then our actual measurable goal is 98% or more students achieve the college and career benchmarks for each grade. As submitted to PIMS. So that's actually the standard is 98%. So, and that's achievable. That's not a problem. We are doing that. We're just going to make those systems talk. So that's number 3. And then number 4, and I don't mean to trick you, there are actually 2 parts to number 4. So there's a 4 and a 5, but it's really all about the same thing, which is instructional strategies. The first one is really about the educators, the teachers in the classroom using the instructional strategies. And the second one is about the leaders, leading and being instructional leaders and helping support the teachers. So the challenge is that we want to focus on these research-based instructional strategies, and we want to make sure they're meeting the needs of all students. It's been a couple years. It's been a lot of trying to figure out how to teach in a pandemic. It's been, how do you teach when you're back while the pandemic's still going on? How do you teach amidst all of the social and emotional needs that are happening right now? So we would just like to find the time to return to a study that we have done for the last 5 years of the elements of effective lessons. You may have heard us talk about it for a long time by Dr. Mike Schmoker, just research-based, very simple. There are 8 elements, and they should be in most of the lessons most of the time. Staff is familiar with them. They're part of induction. So we just want to spend some more time sort of getting back to that. And like, what does it look like, and what do we need to make sure they're happening, and all of that. And then what we do also want to start taking a look at is what are some of those culturally proficient or culturally responsive teaching approaches as well. And we're talking about specific strategies. We're not just talking about making a climate of dignity, which we are talking about, but not only that, but also there are some very specific strategies, a corrective active feedback. That's a strategy, right? Using particular learning protocols. That's a strategy. And they're designed to help students become less dependent and more independent, because that's what we're finding is the difference. When you can do that, achievement gaps close. So we're trying to build independent learners. So the actual goal that we have, let's see, on the next, there we go. For this is that we will have specific approaches being used in most of the classrooms, most of the time for most of the lessons. And we'll know that by teacher surveys to talk to us about what they understand with those things whenever, people go in and do informal observations as well as formal observations. So we'll be sort of making sure we're taking note of how that's happening. And that will include professional development in those areas. And that's what our action steps really are, is making sure that we have time to learn about those things, practice those things, before we start, making sure that we're doing those things. And then number 5 is then the leadership piece. So leaders need to know all of those things and not only know them, but be able to recognize them, be able to describe them, be able to provide actionable feedback regarding their implementation, be able to support teachers with trying different things, taking risks, doing all of these things. So we need to focus our professional development for our leaders, ensuring that they are prepared as instructional leaders, which they all are and want to be, to continue with these research-based instructional strategies and these climate and belonging-based culturally responsive strategies. So we're here to communication. You saw me mention communication a couple of times here, but just so you know, we will continue to share results of any research, any recommendations about moving forward through with the board via the committee and whatever presentations occur during the school board meetings, all throughout the life of the plan, just as we've been doing with the strategic plan. Communication with the community will occur through not only those board reports, but also we plan to really use our Haverford happenings to keep people posted on what's happening and where we are. And then, of course, communication with staff occurs all the time through faculty meetings, curriculum meetings, all of our professional development, surveys, feedback sessions, et cetera. So we keep that loop open. The final section here is I just want to bring back together and also distinguish between the comprehensive and the strategic plans. So if you go to the next slide, so I took each of the goal areas, so you see preparing contemporary citizens here, and in yellow there's the comprehensive plan and how it's addressing, and then in red is how the strategic plan is addressing that area. So for preparing contemporary citizens, that is about the academics, right? Making sure students are understanding what they're supposed to understand. They're doing so in a way that is modernized and is preparing them for the future. So we believe that MTSS falls into that category because it is based on academics, as well as our focus on instructional strategies and leading instructional strategies. Of course, college and career benchmarks falls in that area. It literally is about how do we prepare them to be contemporary citizens. So that falls in there as well. But just as a reminder, we are still doing the things we've talked about with the strategic plan as well, right? So the curriculum cycle is including ways of teaching, units of study, the approach to the texts we use, et cetera, that require us to use those contemporary strategies, right? So it's really building that into the curriculum development process, as well as continuing to collect evidence and share that out and celebrate that where we see it happening, and including that contemporary citizens piece in the instructional strategies professional development. So then we move to diversity and inclusion, which is one of our three goals. You heard in the comprehensive plan about the proportional representation, which falls under that category as well. The professional development for culturally responsive and dignity-based belonging, that all falls under diversity and inclusion because it not only benefits students from various subgroups, but all students. And then leading that work also falls under diversity and inclusion. Likewise, the strategic plan will continue, and we are going to continue our focus on developing a Grow Your Own program where we're hoping to get more students of our own interested in teaching and becoming educators, as well as focusing on our recruiting, hiring, and retention practices so that we can have more educators of color in our system. And diverse educators, not only educators of color, but also educators of color. And then, of course, you've heard us talk about professional development is part of the strategic plan as well, so those two align. And then I mentioned the focus for the equity audit we believe is going to come out of this comprehensive plan. And then finally, I talked about MTSS also having a behavioral and emotional and social component. And so that's where it hits in the comprehensive plan. And for the strategic plan, we're keeping up with those things we were talking about, like the newsletter and the screening and responsive classroom, as well as restorative practices at the secondary level. So that's sort of all of them side by side, so you can see how they relate. All right, we're on to next steps. So the next thing that we will do is post this presentation as well as the actual comprehensive plan on the website. We will include, someone, I believe it will probably, maybe, Dr. Crispin, will, I'm sorry, will be doing the, report for our school board meeting on the 2nd. We will ask also that at whatever subsequent meetings, I think there's another one in June and then just the one in July, if we could just keep mentioning it, because we want to remind folks that it's out there for them to take a look at. If they want to take a look at it on the website, it's there. Because then at the July 14th meeting, we will be asking the board to actually approve the comprehensive plan so that we can submit it to PDE by the deadline on 8/1. And then we submit it to them, and they very often will come back with questions or just, hey, we think you should look in this direction instead of that direction, which is fine. So we just make whatever changes need to be made, and then we resubmit it if that's the case. So I'll just end by, as always, with a thank you to the many, many people who were a part of this planning process, all the way from many years ago with the strategic planning group, up through our administrators, our teachers, everybody who's been a part of making this comprehensive plan and making sure that it sort of fits in with what our strategic approach is as well. And I'm happy to entertain whatever questions you have.
So first, you as well, Jen, I mean, to take the body of work that has been undertaken in the strategic plan, and which is a more, I believe, robust process than what the state requires of us, and then to be able to parallel that work to the comprehensive plan, which is the requirement, is no small undertaking. And to help people understand it is one of the things I think you excel at, and really to have done a nice job with it this evening as well.
Thank you. And I will just say, related to that, it was so affirming to go through the data and find that what folks saw as the areas of need and the areas of strength as part of the strategic planning process were they were the same. They were like, they were very similar. So it was just really, it felt like, oh, good, we are confirming that what we were perceiving is true in our data as well.
Well, I want to thank you for also the organization of the data, because I think it was really helpful to have the tables of the two different plans together. It makes it a lot easier to absorb the information. I know well that planning goals is a fluid process, and that dates and deadlines are also very fluid. But I just was curious, is this then like because you said it comes out every 3 years, so is this a goal over 3 years? Are you looking at some of these to be measurable for just the next year? Do you have a sense yet, like what aspects we're looking to kind of check off over the next year, and then some are a little bit longer term?
Yes, so we did, as part of the plan, you actually have to write at the end of year 1, what's the expectation? At the end of year 2, what's the expectation? And then what I shared with you is the end of year 3.
Okay.
So they are broken down in the plan. I just didn't want to overload everyone with that piece, but you will be able to see that.
Okay, wonderful. That's what I want to see. Yeah, thank you.
Sure, yeah. And like you said, that is fluid.
Yeah,
right,
it has to be.
We'll do what we can, and then we'll adjust as we need to when we learn how they're going.
Yep.
And throughout those years, as updates are being provided at like a curriculum committee meeting or to the board, the goals for that particular year would be the focus of that presentation.
Yeah. I did want to clarify, at one point you said you thought it might end up being the focus, but then it looks like in one of the tables, it is going to be the focus of the equity audit. Do you feel like, has that decision been made, or you're still deciding whether?
Still deciding.
Okay.
Still deciding. Probably.
Okay.
Is what I would say, but we want to have just get a little bit more input from the actual diversity and inclusion group as well. You may recall the ones who presented here. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know when that might be decided?
Probably over the summer or throughout the fall.
Okay.
Yep. Great.
Just a question. It doesn't seem like the state collects any information on like student participation in like extracurriculars or things like that. That's true?
They don't require it. If we wanted to provide additional information, you can put it into the report. We do have that information, I believe. I'll go back and check in our district profile though.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious because I think that's another place where, not every student is academically interested in the same way, right? Regardless of their academic ability, they're not necessarily academically interested, and that's not necessarily where they see themselves. But extracurriculars are a great way for students to really feel belonging and community. And so even if that's not data that's being gathered, I do think that's a really important aspect of belonging and inclusion that we should keep track of, and just making sure that we are seeing diversity and equity in all of our extracurriculars as well as our academics.
Absolutely, thank you. And I do know that's a survey that Mr. Dunnigy usually puts out. I don't know if he was able to do it this year, at the high school level in particular, wanting to know, do you have a job? Do you do extracurricular activities? Are you in sports? And making sure that we are tracking students, because those students are more successful academically and happier, right? And that's important.
Yeah, higher graduation rates. And
Yeah,
lots of good stuff comes from extracurriculars. So, but I wasn't sure if that was something, this is already a lot of information that you have to collect for this, so I don't want to add more, but I do just think in general, as we're thinking about what, like all of the conversations around belonging and inclusion, like I do think that is a really important component. And now that, many of our clubs and organizations are kind of back and in person, hopefully we'll see everybody kind of back into everything in the same way, if not more than they were before, so.
I appreciate, Dr. Crispin, that you brought that up, because I think it's not only about the importance of belonging and the other ways that we can show and demonstrate that we are working towards belonging, but I also think it gives a roundness to intelligence, and that there's multiple different kinds of intelligence. And the standard testings that we do really only target certain kinds of intelligence, and social intelligence and emotional intelligence is really important as well.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Just thank you again.
Oh, thank you, our pleasure.
Helpful.
And I'm happy to turn it over to Nicole for the special education plan.
Thank
Just fewer
you.
slides, so don't.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here tonight with Natalia Adelizi. Natalia is the supervisor of elementary special programs. So we're going to present the special education plan this evening together. What I want to point out is that typically these plans are supposed to be for the same time frame. There has seemed to be some confusion during COVID with plans being pushed back and plans, not happening. So our plan is actually 2021 to 2024 is the time frame. So we had to go back in time for some things we've already done and then project out over the next few years. We've also been informed that we will be doing this again next year. And that's not typical. And we're still trying to figure out, because then I'm not sure what that time frame looks like. But this is, special education plans during COVID-19. So, and I'm not the best at the clicker. I don't know how I got stuck with this job this evening. So what is a special education plan? So typically it's revisited every 3 years, and it's consistent with the comprehensive plan. I already explained that we're kind of off in years here. We are required to do this plan by the state of Pennsylvania, the Department of Ed. It includes the results of our cyclical monitoring. Typically in a non-COVID making up for time year, I would have presented the results of our cyclical monitoring for continuous improvement, which is otherwise known as an audit, prior to presenting the special education plan. However, the timing of our audit is we don't have the results of it yet, but we also have to have the special ed plan presented and submitted in a certain time frame. So we did reach out to the state and ask for guidance on what we do when we don't have the forms that they're telling us to review to make the plan. And what we're doing is we're basing the plan off of the data we have, but also the initial findings of the audit that was shared at our debrief meeting after the on-site visit, which they believe will be very similar, if not identical, to the findings on the official document we get from the state. That document's called the Corrective Action Verification Form, and we'll reference that throughout this plan, because that is what some of this plan is based off of. And this plan really is to ensure quality education for students with disabilities within our district. So we have a steering committee, and tonight we're asking for feedback from the school boards that you need to participate in the steering committee with us. It includes district administrators, parents, guardians, all of you, the general ed teachers, special ed teachers, and building principals. So this looked a variety of ways. We had group meetings, large group meetings, we had individual meetings, we had parent phone calls to walk through the plan. The plan itself is about 158 pages. And so it's not a document I would just want to hand to somebody and say, hey, give me some feedback. We talked through each section with the different groups and the different parents we spoke to get feedback. We also utilized feedback from surveys we received as part of our audit. So the audit team, the state gives you the state survey, so we don't create it, the state creates it. It goes to all the parents of students with IEPs, all teachers in the district, and then also students 14 and over. And so we kind of took some feedback from those surveys to also incorporate into our plan. Thanks, Natalia. So some of the data used, Penn data, and Penn data is really data that's we send to the state annually that breaks down our percentage of students by disability category, by different subgroups that Ms. Ashley already talked about, and by their placement. So whether they're out of district placement or receiving 80% of their instruction in regular ed, that's all broken down in the Penn data. So we look at that data, review it, and make some plans based on that data. Obviously, the results from cyclical monitoring, which is outlined in this document, and we like to align our plan to the strategic goals and mission and pillars of the district as well. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Natalia to walk through some parts of the plan. What we did with this presentation was really take every section of the plan, put it on a slide so that we could describe each section of the plan to you. The first section, which is not on a slide, is simply my name, Dr. Rishi's name, the district's name, and the population of students that reside in the district. So not the most exciting slide, but that does exist.
Yep. All right. So of the 23 areas monitored within our facilitated self-assessment, or FSA, you know, if you've sat through any special education presentation, that acronyms and special education are synonymous, so I'll be sure to give you your fill this evening. So during our post-audit debrief with the Bureau of Special Ed, or BSE, of the 23 areas monitored, our advisor provided us with one indicator which we were flagged as an area of improvement for an improvement plan, and then 2 areas for corrective action verification. And so those areas are, the first is indicator number 3B, assessment, which falls under FSA number 16. I understand that is very straightforward, but that is just how the state does it. So you'll see there that our SPP target, it's a statewide target of 95%. So they would like 95% of students with disabilities to participate in the PSSAs or the PASA, which is the alternate state assessment for students with our complex learners. Our participation rate in the 2018 year was, which is the year that they used to pull this data, is 91.8% in reading, 92.9% in math. I think it's also important to note that we've actually seen even a decrease in participation amongst our entire population under the years of COVID. So this will be an area that it's going to take a few years for us to continue, to continue to grow and continue to really try and increase that participation rate. You could also see that the 2 areas that we were monitoring are FSA 12, which is extended school year notification, and then FSA 19A, our teacher survey, and a plan for support. So we will work alongside our school teams, our IEP teams, to really look at how we qualify students for extended school year and just making sure that all of the appropriate boxes. So to qualify somebody for an extended school year, it's a discussion at the IEP meeting. We also have to note it within the IEP. Then we have to send home paperwork that says that your child qualifies or doesn't qualify, and then we have to get all of those signatures back. So it really is a very heavy paperwork process. I think we do a really good job communicating with families around the table. We just have to make sure that our paperwork process catches up to the solid communication I feel that we have. It's the paperwork piece, though, that we need to get in line for this area of improvement. And then the next one is FSA 19A, which is our teacher survey and our plan for support. So as part of our facilitated self-assessment, which we completed in March 2022, the feedback from our teachers is that we need to continue to look at the barriers that exist for students with IEPs to participate in general education. So essentially, our teachers felt that there are barriers that exist. So it's good to know that there are barriers. Our plan, though, they don't tell us what barriers, right? So we have to now really survey our teachers and figure out what are those barriers. So we'll dig a little bit deeper into that data. And then this survey information, once we figure out what the barriers are that exist or they feel that exist, we can then create an action plan very specific and targeted to those perceived barriers. The next area of the special education plan, this is a checkbox. In Pennsylvania, there are two ways to be identified as a student with a disability, either through RTI or through what is called the discrepancy model. So a discrepancy between a child's cognitive abilities and then their achievement on academic testing. If there is a discrepancy there, a disability exists, and then we can qualify that child for special education. So we just have to let the state know which identification method we use. I'm not good at it either.
Yep.
There you go. Thank you. So IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, is really the foundation for all special education law. And this requires that the state develop a standard methodology for LEAs, which is us, the school district, to determine if significant disproportionality exists. So that ensures that children with disabilities are properly identified for services and are under or over identified in any of the various subcategories. They give us a pretty complicated formula to determine significant disproportionality in placement, discipline, and identification, and we have not been flagged in any of those areas for significant disproportionality, which is a really good thing. So non-resident student oversight. So at times, school-age children are placed in residential programs for reasons that aren't related to a child's educational need. So this may occur sometimes by a county mental health agency, children and youth services, or sometimes by the local court. So public school code requires us, and it requires these residential programs to work closely with the LEA which is us, to ensure that we have a smooth transition back to district programming. So if there are ever times we have to make sure that we're really talking with the child's family, with the care team, and ensuring that they're ready to come back to school and we have all of the supports in place so that when we get here, they are successful. The incarcerated students oversight, we don't have any detention facilities in our boundary, but if we did, we would be responsible as the LEA to provide education for those children, but we do not have any correctional facilities within our boundaries. Least restrictive environment, that's my favorite acronym in special education, LRE. So we are responsible for making sure that students with disabilities are educated alongside students without disabilities to the extent appropriate for that student. And generally appropriate, we look at that the education meets the student's special needs and allows the student to make educational progress. So it really relates back to what Ms. Saxo was talking about before of making growth, right? That's what we're really looking at. What is the environment that children can make growth? And sometimes an IEP team, which always includes the family, the parents, and at times the student at 14 or older, we are really talking about what are the supplementary aids and services that a child needs to be successful in that least restrictive environment. And so sometimes that includes assistive technology. It might include a nurse, accommodations, modifications to the curriculum, a whole variety of specially designed instruction to ensure that students are making growth. And you can see there the various out-of-district placements that we have to list all of those throughout our special education plan. Oh, back one.
Go back.
Go back one. No. Forward one. Positive behavior support is where there we go. Thank you. So this section of our plan highlights the positive behavior supports policy that the school board has adopted, 113.1, and the proactive measures that we use to work with students, such as, and this is not an all-inclusive list, but our Students Assistance Program, our use of responsive classroom, the social and emotional learning provided by our school counselors on a regular basis to our students, and we also have a comprehensive curriculum within our emotional support program. And our emotional support program is available in all buildings, which is a really important part of this. So PDE has participated with other child-serving agencies in developing a system for providing intensive interagency coordination for students with disabilities. And there are times where there are children that we have a hard time finding an appropriate environment. We do not have any students at this time who are in that situation. We're always really ahead of that and working proactively with their families to try and look ahead and project into the future about what children's needs are at the time and what they're going to be. So we don't have any flags in that area. Good luck with that.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to take it back over to go through the educational program profile. And this portion of the special ed plan is quite lengthy because it requires us to list all of the program we have throughout the district by the position. So we have to list, Manoa's teacher 1, teaches learning support, and the age range of the students on that teacher's caseload, and the number of students on the caseload. So to make it a little bit easier, because it probably is about 50 pages of the special education plan, we put in here what programs we have in the district, at what level we have the programs, and the location of those programs. So you can see we have autistic support at the itinerant and supplemental levels, Coopertown, Manoa, the middle school and the high school. Emotional support is in all buildings at the itinerant level. Learning support, itinerant and supplemental in all buildings. Life skill support, itinerant and supplemental in Linwood, the middle school and high school. And speech and language support at the itinerant level in all buildings. Sure.
Actually, yeah, could you just clarify supplemental versus itinerant?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, this is something that we just do all the time. So
That's fine.
So supplemental, so it's the percentage of time spent in the regular education classroom. So students who are itinerant spent 80% or more of their time in the regular education classroom. And then it goes down from this. So supplemental is like 40%, and then full-time is less than 20%, right? So those are like the levels of support of being supported by a special education program or teacher.
So supplemental essentially is higher.
Yes.
Support level of support. Okay.
Yes. Yep. And so I also wanted to point out during this slide that this plan, although it says it goes, the 2021 to 2024, it is very common that we revise this plan based on student need or even like building need. So while these are the classrooms that exist in these buildings, I will submit, and here's another acronym, a SEPRIN. It's a special education plan revision notice. I don't know why it has to be an acronym, but it is. Whenever we're going to add a classroom to a building or move a classroom in a building. So what happens is so for instance, next year, we're adding another autistic support classroom at Manoa. I will call the Bureau of Special Ed and say, I plan to add another classroom. They'll say, submit your SEPRIN. I will go in the document and type all of my information. I invite them out to come see the classroom, and they measure the classroom and make sure it's in the ebb and flow of the rest of the classrooms. It's not in the basement. It's not an old electrical closet, like things that should never happen, obviously. But I always invite the Bureau of Special Ed advisor out to see our classrooms. And this portion of the document as well as the classrooms, and I talked about the teachers, it includes the measurements of every single special education classroom in the district, because we have to submit that to make sure that we're in compliance and all of our classrooms meet the requirements of the Bureau of Special Ed. But it is a rather it's a rather lengthy section of the document just because of the amount of information for every single classroom that has to be added. On the next slide, I talked a little bit about this, but we do have 74 case managers, which are the special education teachers or speech therapists that provide services. And so that part of the plan where I will say Manoa's teacher, learning support, kindergarten through second grade, that outlines every single teacher in the district, the kids who are on their caseload, the age range of those students, and the level of support they're providing. So that's also a rather lengthy section of the document that can be very easily summarized by providing the programs we have in the district. on this slide, these are all the special education services that are not, they do not have a caseload, like they don't case manage an IEP. So if you have an IEP, the special education teacher is your case manager, they manage your IEP, but an occupational therapist might see you twice a week and they contribute to that IEP. So these are all the supports throughout the district that don't have a caseload or case management list, but do provide services and support to our students. An additional part of this plan was to outline our professional personnel development from 2021 to 2024. So we went back in time and listed some of our trainings and we planned for the future. The trainings we offer, we have trainings in autism, behavior support. We offer a lot of paraprofessional trainings to our paraprofessionals. Trainings on transition, the science of literacy. We have parent trainings, and we have recently we offered a training on anxiety for parents based on feedback from the PTO surveys. And we discussed last night that might be an annual training because it's something that seemed very interesting to parents. It's something that we anticipated seeing as an interest based on the times currently. And so that's an example of a parent training. We've been doing them over a Zoom right now. We do have plans for additional parent trainings on a variety of things, and they look different. So parent training can be that a child has a very specific need, and when our team attends training, we invite the parents to attend as well. So if there's a very specific need for a student that's not something widely needed by other students, we'll invite the parent to that training as well to participate with our staff. So it looks a variety of ways. We've been doing what we've been calling like our Complex Learners Institute with the DCIU, where they've been consulting with us, coming out, giving feedback on our classrooms, providing a structure for our teachers and aides to work together to discuss, how to best support students in our classes. And we also do trainings on data that we have a lot of data in special education. And so there's a lot to understand and to utilize in order to program for our students. So this section, I didn't go into detail of every single training, but they all fall under these categories and will be happening. Some of them have already happened in 2021 and will continue through 2024. And we do utilize the IU, PATAN, and a Safe Schools program, people in-house that, are skilled. Miss Adelizi is our safety care trainer. So she's a certified trainer, so then she can train our staff in safety care. You saw that on the positive behavior support. That is training on de-escalation and restraints, which is required under our positive behavior support board policy and also with the state of Pennsylvania. So we offer a variety of trainings throughout the year for a variety of people. So our next steps, we'll post this plan on the district website. It will not get posted as quickly as the comprehensive plan because I would like to get that corrective action verification from the state to ensure that what we wrote in this document is still what is on that document. I do anticipate that they will be the same thing. That is the feedback I've gotten, but I wouldn't want to post for feedback and then change it and then post it again. We will have Dr. Crispin here provide a summary at our next board meeting. We'll include it in Haverford happenings. It will be posted on the website for vote in July. And then we actually have to submit July 30th to PDE because it's for some reason slightly different than the comprehensive plan. So are there any questions? I know that's a lot of information, but we'd be happy to take some questions.
Yeah, I think a two-part question. Could you go back to slide 42?
I can try my best.
Or, okay, you can.
Can you tell me what the title is? Because I don't have numbers on my.
Education profile, education program profile? That one right there.
Okay,
yeah.
yep.
So I'm just curious, you talked a little bit about the facilities and the location for all these programs. And the reason I'm asking this question is I'm a facilities person, obviously. And will there be coordination between the needs of what might be, of what these programs are and the facilities assessment that we're doing right now?
Yes. So typically, and I can tell you just like about Linwood, when we were building Linwood, there were specific classrooms in mind to meet the needs of students based on our special education plan. Okay. So that's always a part of the process. It is part of that consideration. Yes.
Okay, so it's coordination then, so that, 'cause I mean, obviously, I'm looking at the locations, Chestnut Wold, there's no room anywhere there, so that's not in, that's not in a lot of these, obviously. Chatham, obviously, isn't. I just wanted to ensure that moving forward, as we do the assessment and kind of figure out what we need over the next 5-10 years, that this is important. I mean, I've heard great things about the autistic support program at Manoa, for example. I mean, I've heard it's people rave about that. I'm thrilled about that. Just want to ensure that all of these people can eventually rave about, and that we have room and space and planning for. I mean, I'm glad, and I do know, I remember that Linwood does have classrooms dedicated to life skills.
Yes.
And so,
Yes, and our programs are great,
Yeah.
and our teachers are great, and our principals are really great about understanding the needs of our programs. And so if, for instance, the autistic support program at Manoa may need to have a bathroom in the classroom, and so that's going to have to take, a part of a classroom that may have had a bathroom that wasn't initially used for that. So there's a lot of principal input, teacher input. We get involved, and then once we're settled, we invite the Bureau of Special Ed out to use their little laser to measure our walls.
okay, great.
And I also want to say, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I have to thank JR and the maintenance crew for measuring every single special education classroom in the school district, because we were getting ready to go out with measuring tape. And I called JR, he's like, we'll just do it. So thank you to JR and his team for saving us a lot of time.
Okay. Yeah, so I'll make sure that gets fed into that assessment so that we can make sure. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question too, and it's just, because you said itinerant means that they're spending 80% of time in the regular education classroom, right?
Mhm.
So what do children do who don't go to Coopertown or Manoa, who spend 80% of the time in their own regular education classroom, and need 20% autistic support? Do they then go to Coopertown and Manoa
Yes.
full time? Okay.
Yes.
That
So
was my question.
that was something, and that's something that comes into that separate that I mentioned.
Okay.
When we had autistic support just at Coopertown, we started to notice that we had almost a classroom of Manoa students.
Right.
And our goal is for inclusion. And so we started formulating, okay, we have almost a whole classroom of students whose homeschools Manoa. How do we get them back to Manoa so they're with their siblings, they're with their neighbors? And so we look at that every year, and as things, students change and they get older and new students come in, and that's part of, special ed is so individualized that having a plan that wouldn't allow revisions would not make sense. So we are able to do that, and we do that every single year.
Right. And then I guess, since the special education subgroup was identified in the strategic plan as one that would need, potential growth, I think, and also achievement, I assume that you all have worked together as well, and a lot of
We meet a lot.
cooperation. But I do think I do think that it's good to just point that out, because there are obvious themes that are through both of these presentations, right? And so, just could speak a little bit about how that integration has worked between these two
Sure.
groups.
And Natalia meets with the coordinators in curriculum weekly, if not more than that. And then we, as a full department, two full departments, meet every single month. And we were talking about things we noticed, things we're questioning, things we might want to consider. Every single month we're meeting, in addition to more than weekly meetings as a team.
And just for example, Dr. Nesbitt, who is our math supervisor, he met with our school psychologist last week to do a PD on how we use the data that he has. How can we incorporate that better into our special ed? So that's just a small snapshot, but that happens on an almost weekly basis of something else. As we are looking at student data, as we learn new things, we are constantly coordinating with each other as to how we can better sync and improve our services for kids.
Can I don't forget, they are doing a lot of work also on a curriculum review cycle that is specific to special education. So they divided, they're looking at ELA K-12, they're going to look at programs, and, there's a whole schedule laid out for that as well. That is something else that we try to support, but Pupil Services takes the lead on that, and it helps address all of these things.
Right. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
something kind of off of that, which I think you may have already answered, but just for a little bit more clarification, in the previous presentation, talking about the T1, T2, and T3, and if I heard correctly, it was T3 trying to do some new interventions, and then possibly it might trigger an IEP evaluation. Obviously, every case is different and the timing of it is different, but is there a sense of like overall what the timeline of trying new interventions before an IEP, or maybe it is just so individual that you can't?
It's very, very individualized, but what we want to see is growth. So if we're working with a student and we're trying an intervention and there's no growth, and then we try another intervention and there's no growth, that's when we have more concern. But if we're seeing some growth, something's working. And so we want to keep with what's working. And that might be enough to bring the child up. But it is very, very individualized based on student need. But what's really important is seeing growth and response to those interventions.
I was gonna say, the reason I mentioned the school psychologist as well is that we really always try and triangulate our data, right? So we're not just looking at like one data point, one student's assessment. We're really looking at, okay, we have this one assessment. Where else do we have that data? And we really try and use that to get a really accurate picture of a child's growth profile.
Any other questions from the board?
I just have a comment of, I think it's really wonderful that you've invited parents in for training, because as we know, we only have students in schools for so long. And really the importance is there being continuous care for folks. So I think that's a really great benefit, is to invite parents in for those trainings as well.
Thank you. And I'm sure we'll be back to present the results of our cyclical monitoring once we officially have them as well. A little out of order this time around, though. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes our agenda.
Yes, it does.
Any other comments from the board? Dr. Ruji? We're all good?
Have a good weekend.
Everybody have a great holiday weekend.
I guess we'll just note there's no one here from the public for public comment,
public
because there
comment,
is
yes.
not on the agenda.
Okay, I'll accept the
Thank you.
motion to adjourn then.
Yep, second.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone.